Recently, there's been a new addition to the tower defense franchise that surprisingly is really good on release. Ladies and gentlemen, I am talking about the one and only TDX. TDX, which was released on November 21st, 2023, was created by the well-known tower defense YouTuber John Roblox. I would say John did a pretty good job at balancing every tower and giving each tower a purpose. Many towers do excellent in some areas while needing some bandages in some others. I wanted to put this to the test and see how long each tower can survive in TDX. First of all, some quick and basic rules. Each game will be played on Ancient Sky Island to make sure they're all just the same, with one exception. Next, each game will be played on easy mode just because, well, it's the easiest. 500 likes for intermediates. Each tower will be ranked on where they kill the boss on the path. Towers that can't kill the boss or can't even make it to the boss wave will be ranked on the wave they died on. With that out of the way, let's get right into it. Ranger is the starter tower that you get upon joining. Since it's the very first tower, it's not very good. Sure, it has some pretty decent DPS for its cost, but eventually gets outclassed by other towers. There is one thing that this tower was meant to be able to do, and that one thing is to beat easy mode, which is exactly what this challenge is about. In the run, Ranger had a really good start since they are the cheapest tower in the game to place. The upgrades for Ranger are rather good, so early to mid game was no problem. It wasn't until the final wave when this tower received its actual challenge. Ranger got the Plague Doctor down to 10,000 health before round 2, and by round 2 I mean when he goes around the loop and comes back to the exact location where my towers are all waiting. The Plague Doctor got very far along the path and I was actually so close to dying, but gladly I won, meaning that Ranger is our very first winner who killed the boss right about there. Shotgunner is one of the most underrated towers in my opinion. Upon release, Shotgunner was kinda mediocre and didn't have great DPS for its cost, but then was soon buffed to deal 70 DPS at max level on top path. Shotgunner having a lower DPS and lower range than Ranger was already worrying to me, because Ranger was barely able to beat this mode. Shotgunner was extremely good in the early waves and was also really good at mid game. Everything was peaches and cream until I was in a pickle with what path I should get. Top path had more DPS and hidden detection, while bottom path had higher range and better pierce. I thought it through and eventually came to the conclusion that range would be better for killing the boss. Not so long after, Stealth Abominations came out and I had to quickly try to clutch up with some top path shotgunners. Gladly, I made it to the final wave and as expected, I died to the Plague Doctor, who had just under 15,000 health when he walked in. Operator is a pretty solid tower. Operator, who has a really good early game and late game potential, did really well. Operator, in my opinion, is just a better Ranger. His domination of early to mid game was of no surprise to me, and it wasn't until the boss when Operator finally had a challenge, similar to Ranger. The boss was getting shredded and with no surprise, Operator killed the boss that far on the path and claimed an early first place title. Operator was soon to be humbled by the one and only Mine Layer. Yeah, Mine Layer on its own just gets owned by the massive hordes of zombies. Though the tower is pretty alright when you pair it up with other towers, Mine Layer needs the other towers to defend off other zombies. Mine Layer is kind of considered to be a last resort emergency button if things get too difficult. Mine Layer, or as Carlo calls it, Riz Layer, died on wave 9 because of its not so good DPS. I had some pretty high hopes for Sniper. I knew its pierce would be helpful for the early game and its high DPS with high range would be crucial. Early game was very much a breeze since Sniper is able to one-shot every enemy from base level until wave 6. Sniper continued to do really well and eventually got to the final wave. The Plague Doctor wasn't much of a struggle for Sniper because of Sniper's massive range, and eventually killed Plague Doctor very early on the path, earning Sniper its very own first place. We now have enough towers to make ourselves a podium. Ranger is in third place, with Operator in second and Sniper in first. Will they all stay on the podium or will they get knocked down? Let's find out. Missile Trooper is a very good splash damage tower. Missile Trooper is basically Tuber from tower battles, but better. Missile Trooper on top path can deal insane single target damage, while bottom path focuses more on crowds of enemies. There is one thing Missile Trooper slacks, and that is early game. Early game was a massive struggle for Missile Trooper since there are so many low health enemies scattered all around the map. Because of this, Missile Trooper almost died in the early game. Gladly, Missile Trooper was able to get out of the struggles of early game and started doing really well in mid to late game. Missile Trooper was able to bring home the bacon with a pretty easy win and gained itself a second place title, with Sniper still in first and Operator in third. Next up is Patrol Boat. Patrol Boat is arguably one of the best towers in the game if you have water. Ancient Sky Islands doesn't have water, which is a small problem for patrol boats. So I decided to test Patrol out on Misleading Pond. Patrol Boat was doing very well and wasn't coming across any obstacles until Stealth showed up. Because Patrol Boat has no stealth detection, my grave was dug quite early on wave 20 due to some stealth enemies. Not that bad of a performance by Patrol Boats. You may be wondering why I skipped over a couple of towers. Before you start writing a comment about why I skipped blah blah blah, just wait, let me cook. Cryoblaster, Farm, EDJ, Railgunner, and Juggernaut all die on the same wave. If you're wondering why, that's because Cryo doesn't deal any damage until level 3 on bottom path, Farm doesn't deal any damage, EDJ also doesn't deal any damage, Railgunner is expensive and has a long cooldown, and Juggernaut is just a little bit expensive. Happy? I even named this part of the script Loser Towers to prove that all these towers are all losers. Moving on. Barracks, Barracks, Barack Obama, all basically the same thing. I don't care if I'm pronouncing it wrong, all of you Brits can cry about it in the comments. Anyways, Barracks did a pretty good job. At the time of recording this video, I only used the Barracks once before and I had no idea how to use it, except for the fact that I knew level 4 on top path gave stealth detection. Barracks did a pretty good job throughout the whole game. And because of how good the map is, Barracks were able to group up in the middle and basically shoot out the enemies without a worry in the world. Eventually, Barracks got to the final wave and killed the boss in a very similar spot to Operator. I spent a whole 15 minutes debating which one killed it faster and eventually came to the conclusion that Operator killed it faster. If you think I'm wrong, let me know in the comments or in my Discord server because I still have no idea. Grenadier had a pretty solid start. His high early game damage was just too good. I was a bit cautious about what path I should take because both looked very good. Bottom path was more meant for stuns, while top path focused more on DPS. I thought that DPS would be my best bet since I knew that Plague Doctor wouldn't be easy to take down. Grenadier flew through every single wave except for the final wave. If you couldn't tell, Grenadier is a splash damage tower, meaning that he only does well against hordes of enemies and not single targets, especially targets that can't get stunned. Grenadier did do quite a bit of damage to the Plague Doctor, but at the end of the day ended up dying. Next up is John. John is one of my favorite towers in the game just because of his super cool deagles on top path. John, when maxed out on top path, can give all nearby towers a big damage buff, and if you partner that with top path DJ's ability, you get destruction. John is a really good tower and can handle high health enemies and only lacks in one thing, which, similar to patrol boats, is stealth detection. John did do really good until Stealth showed up and ended his run on wave 16. Laser Gunner is, in my opinion, the overall best tower in the game. Laser Gunner has a pretty solid DPS for its cost and gets stealth detection at base level. Laser Gunner had a really easy early to mid game and only found a problem when the Plague Doctor showed up. Because of Laser Gunner's limited range, the Plague Doctor quickly got out of its range and Laser Gunner could only see the boss when he looped back around, meaning that Laser Gunner did not make it on the podium. Though Laser Gunner did not win, it still did an absurd amount of DPS when the boss was in range and did kill the boss with ease. Now it's time for the only event tower, which is Cryo Ranger. Cryo Ranger is surprisingly a pretty viable option for this challenge. Cryo Ranger, which is meant to be a support tower that can freeze enemies while also dealing pretty good damage, did really well. The early game wasn't a challenge, and the only real challenge, along with almost every other tower here, was the Plague Doctor. Sadly, Cryo Ranger couldn't kill the Plague Doctor and left him with a little over 1000 health, but still did do a really good job. Now for the final placing of each tower. Here's a tier list of where each tower got in terms of waves, and here are some honorable mentions of towers that did beat easy mode but couldn't kill the boss fast enough. Now for the top 3. In third place we have Operator, who just barely beat Barracks and had a consistently good amount of damage throughout the game. In second we have Missile Trooper, who killed the boss quite a bit earlier on the path than Operator but had a very slow early game. Lastly, in first place, we have Sniper. Bottom Path Sniper just has a really good DPS, range, and pierce, which led it to killing the boss quite early. I want to quickly give Monster a small shout out since he let me use his private server for the recording of this video since I am El Cheapo. Anyways, please consider subscribing or leaving me a like, it is greatly appreciated. Also consider joining my Discord server, that is where you can ask me questions about a video or hop in a VC with me when I'm online. Lastly, at 2,500 subscribers, I'm going to be having a Q&A, which will be hosted in my Discord server. I hope y'all enjoy the video and leave on this final message.
Top Path Missile Trooper needs a nerf.